you all again for joining us for the second event of our series, Seeking Good, Clean, and Fair Food for All. Today our focus is on inclusion. It's wonderful to have Jodi Kushins, Abed Alshahal, and Pastor John Edgar with us, as well as Erin. Hopefully Gary will be joining us as well for the Q&A later. Just as a reminder, this is part of the Ohio State APOP series of events, as well as with Slow Food Columbus. From now, or since October 8th until November 18th, this is part of a 6-week celebration of the hands that feed you. As we've said in multiple messages before, usually we'd be having Shake the Hand That Feeds You, our annual fundraising event. But because of COVID, we decided to shift to this online model. And so in terms of upcoming events, October 28th is the last day to submit a design for our t-shirt contest. October 30th is our deadline to sign up for our Columbus Food Adventures Trust Fall meal. Typically the Trust Fall meal is $40 for 2 people for the meal. It's truly a trust fall. We trust the people who are organizing the dinner for us to come up with a great meal from an immigrant restaurant here in Central Ohio. For this particular event, it will have an extra course and the food is delivered to you within Franklin County. That's for $60. So if anyone's interested in that, we invite you to go to our website and sign up for one of those meals. October 31st, we'll start voting on t-shirt designs, hoping with expectation that we'll actually get some designs coming in. November 7th is the meal itself. November 14th, we'll close voting on that. The third event of our series on justice, which requires advance registration, just like for this event, will be November 17th. I will announce our t-shirt design winner on November 18th. As I mentioned in the first session, this is part of this whole series is wrapped up around the Slow Food USA Manifesto for Equity, Inclusion, and Justice. And this is one of the more recent initiatives from Slow Food. And as I explained to our panelists earlier, there's been a bit of a shift, I think, in the way that Slow Food USA and many of the chapters have been focusing their efforts around good, clean, and fair food. And so one of the things we think about, or a challenge to think about, is how do we apply this reality for folks, especially when you consider questions of race, class, and gender disparities. In our first event, we have taken a look at the first 8 or so principles or commitments that Slow Food USA had put as part of their manifesto. Here I've listed the next 8, and then we'll talk about the next, or I'll show the next 8 on November 17th. But these are some ways that we can start thinking about how can we apply these principles or commitments to our daily lived experience. So how can we find those ways to invoke indigenous ancestral homelands and waters? Can we make sure that we're looking for ways of expressing diversity in ways that are inclusive and just and fair practices for all? Can we diversify our boards and our board members to try and ensure as much diversity and exchange of ideas as possible? And so we take a look at this list, and these are things that we just want to prompt you to think about as we listen to our speakers and as we enter our Q&A and even beyond this event. So like I said, I'm very thankful for Jodi, Abed, and Pastor John for joining us today. We'll start with Jodi Kushins, who will speak on her experience. We can see her bio here, and then she will be sharing her screen, which Jodi can go ahead and do so now. And then you can take it away.
You don't want to see that. All right, so good evening, everybody, and thanks for having me here. So by way of introduction, I wanted to share my response to Mark Anthony when he invited me to be on this panel. Mark, I'm really honored you reached out to me. However, I'm pretty sensitive about the fact that I don't feel like my work is directly engaged with equity and inclusion to any great extent. Somehow being an urban farmer makes that seem more important. And as such, all the worse that I'm missing the mark. Overall, my CSA members and kids that are part of the garden club I host for the Clintonville Farmers Market are white and middle class, not by my intention, but probably because I am white and middle class. And even since I've written that, it's just gotten me thinking again. It's something I've thought about a lot before, but the Mark Anthony received this message, brought it to the Slow Foods board, and everyone persisted in pushing me to come and share some ideas. So what I prepared for tonight is a short talk, and I'm an art educator when I'm not farming, and so I'm guided by images, so I couldn't not put together PowerPoint. It's just who I am, but I'm going to use the PowerPoint and talk from notes because I have a tendency to have verbal diarrhea, and I don't have time for that tonight because I only have 15 minutes. So I apologize in advance for reading. But what I'm going to do is just briefly talk about the identities that I hold in my work at Over the Fence Urban Farm, which is a community farming project in Clintonville. And I call myself a farmer, educator, and creative placemaker. So we'll start with the farmer identity. When I started Over the Fence 8 years ago, I thought a lot about what to call myself, and what to call the project. Is it a garden? Is it a farm? How big does it have to be a farm? Can I really call myself a farmer? I have absolutely no training in this. Ultimately, I went ahead and just adopted that title and have grown into it over the years, wrestled with it, rethought whether it was right. But for the past 3 years, I've troubled those waters even more by starting to think about myself as a Jewish farmer, and whether I'm farming as a Jew or Jewishly farming. And there's lots of questions that have sort of come up for me around that. If you're quick, you'll realize that about 3 years ago puts us in the middle of the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, and the mass shooting at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh. So it was a sort of weird time to come out as a Jewish farmer. I have a presence online. I have a blog that I update regularly and people follow. I have a Facebook group, Instagram account, all of this. And the first time I hit return on the keyboard when I posted this blog post about propagating my Jewish roots, I thought about it for a minute, not because I think white supremacists are on the hunt for, white women farming in Columbus, Ohio, but it felt like an identity that has always been a really important part of who I am, but not something that I'm not, Jews are not into proselytizing or anything like that. And I wasn't really looking to draw attention to myself. But it was there were a lot of ideas and teachings coming from this ancient wisdom tradition that I really always had been drawn to in terms of the environmental and food justice related aspects of Judaism. And I really wanted to explore those in my farming, because I had come to farming as a foodie, as a person who never was a member of Slow Food Columbus, but I appreciate good food. I appreciate where food comes from. Had been getting to know my farmers better. So for the past 3 years, I've been exploring Judaism, not as a religion, but as much as an evolving civilization, one in which that's tied very much to land. And I went through a line of thinking and preparing for tonight about indigeneity and Jews in the land of Israel. And I couldn't quite get to a place where, and the politics around Israel is something I try not to talk about because I don't feel expert in that. But I did think about the fact that the Jewish people have for many millennia been nomads, and that even in my own family's history, my grandparents came to this country from Eastern Europe and spent 3 years in the New York metro area. And now myself and my cousins are scattered to the four winds of the United States. And so we're experiencing this idea of family and relationship to place in ways that force you to really think, I think, and work hard to form a relationship to place. And as somebody who came to the Midwest for graduate school and lived very much in my head in the Ohio State University zip code for 4 years, when I decided to stay in Columbus, I really wanted to find a way to dig my roots down. And my husband happened to be living in a house that he bought from his grandmother that his mother had grown up in. And so here in Clintonville, so his grandparents had a big kitchen garden in the back. And I've been really proud to at least be able to inherit the sort of generations of experience that have happened on this land in connecting food and family. But I'm increasingly cognizant of the fact that we're inhabiting land that was indigenous homeland to the Wyandotte, Shawnee, Delaware peoples, who were here for many generations before Columbus was colonized. And I also recognize that our neighborhood and our family have benefit from residential security mapping practices that are more commonly referred to as redlining. And they even have been able to find a map. I forgot to skip to the slide. This is our house in 1946 when it was first built. It looks a lot different today, but you can see there isn't even a road paved yet, and it's just nice to have this history. Since the streets of New York will always be home to me, but it's nice to be able to inherit this history. But we do benefit from this generational accumulation of wealth. And when I decided I wanted to farm, I had land to do it on, not a lot, 2/10 of an acre, but I have legal sovereignty over that land, and I'm really aware of that and privilege that provides to me. At the same time, I'm also struggling to find as much time as I would like to have and need to have to be a successful farmer, because I balance that work with being an educator, being a parent, being a community leader in other organizations. So this was a slide I was going to share in terms of, this was just an experimental area that I created this year because we had some extra space that opened up when our play set came down, and I have that power to do whatever I want with my land. This is a cover book that I found on the Slow Foods website in the bookshop, and if you've never explored it, there's a lot of great titles there. But when you look at the cover, this is an image of industrial agriculture that I am simultaneously working against every single day. I go into my backyard and plant something or put my hands in the soil. But it's also a system that I am aware that I rely upon every day. So thinking beyond the human aspects of inclusivity, I'm really interested in models for experimenting with integrative agriculture that combines species of plants in the interest of forming guilds and polycultures. And so when you look at these images of the farm from just a month ago, you can see that there's lots and lots of diversity living together, various kinds of pollinators and perennial plants, along with herbs and vegetables and annuals, and a lot going on. So it's these practices that are often discussed as a contrast to the monocultural production that you saw in the last picture. And as I was putting these pictures together, I was thinking that maybe while I came to this thinking this is an example of farming and inclusivity that's about the plants, really the plants can serve as a metaphor for us. And that if we are farming in a way where we're combining lots of species and letting them live together and watching how they can make each other thrive, that can be a really good analogy for the kind of inclusive, equitable, just society we're working toward. I'm probably running short on time, but I'll try to speed up. So at the start of the quarantine, when everyone was talking about limiting the number of people who touched their groceries before they do, I shared this image on my blog. And it seemed clear, like a clear call to know your farmer, find a farmer who you could call your own. But beyond the germs, I see this as an image representing our relationship to our food. Because if you look at the statistics, a century ago, 30% of the American population were farmers. And now that number hovers around normally just below 1%. So as a result, few people are aware of where their food comes from and form this disconnection, which works against all the principles that you were sharing, Mark Anthony, that about equity that we're working towards. So one of the things that I do a lot of is educational activities. So some of those things happen on the farm. These are images from the Clintonville Farmers Market Kids Garden Club. I also have a work share that's incorporated as part of the CSA program that I run. So people are always coming and helping and just learning something new about how their food is grown. We also do a lot of farm tours in typical non-COVIDian years. And so in addition to, this is something I tried to do while I was talking, let's see. So in addition to the on-site things, I do a lot of my educational work through our blog. And this is just like a streaming list of like all the countries and that people have visited our blog from over 8 years. And I just think it's like amazing to think that if even for a moment, even if someone like Googled something and then they were like, oh, that looks interesting. And they clicked on our blog and they were like, no, this is garbage and I don't want to read it. For a minute, like we were like in their consciousness. And I think that's pretty amazing. So we have the blog, we update Facebook, and I'm always trying to use those spaces to bring awareness to different food justice issues as those come up about, as well as just sort of how do we grow our food. In the spring, when quarantine hit and all the kids got sent home from school, my daughter and I led a series of free 30 to 40-minute sessions every Wednesday for about 3 months. They were filmed on Facebook Live and then posted to a YouTube channel. And we got a lot of nice feedback and interest from parents and educators across the city. So the last point, my last point of identity is this idea of creative placemaking. And like we could talk for a really long time about that, but in 2 minutes or less, creative placemaking is defined by the American Planning Association. So it's like an economic and social, it's a interdisciplinary kind of field where urban planners in particular look at how people can be engaged in creative activities to address social and economic issues in community. So the part of Clintonville that I live in definitely it's far from a food desert, but everyone needs to eat, and we're all trying to, live as low a carbon footprint as we can, to know where our food comes from. And so the farm is definitely a space where we're trying to do that. So it's an alternate vision of how society can be too, a creative way of using land. So I remember when I was first getting involved in the urban, or interested really seriously in urban agriculture, I had seen a line from the Food Not Lawns group that said something like, if the only person who walks on your lawn is the one who mows it, maybe you should rethink whether it should be a lawn. And so we had been gardening like on our side of the fence for a number of years, and looking over at the image you see on the left, which was at the time my elderly neighbor Louise's yard. And it's south facing and just was like calling to me to grow on it. And so again, by way of my privilege and also my ability and willingness to build relationships with people, to give myself a little credit, we got access to this land and have turned it into the farm. So the image on the right, you're standing in our yard looking into what is now my mother-in-law's backyard and the farm. So so we're cultivating really like what we call in the farming community, food world, like value added product. So I think, I am not the most productive urban farmer in Columbus, Ohio, but I am cultivating things beyond just food. So relationships and education and creative space. So my vision is that every city in Columbus would have a plot like this, and that the neighbors on that block could help tend it. And I know it could be done because they do it in Europe. I don't know how to make it happen here, but I'm not giving up on my dream. And I really appreciate the invitation to come here tonight and think about it in a new way. So thanks. Oh, here's just some pretty pictures.
Great, and thanks so much, Jodi, for sharing that experience with all of us here. All right, I will just keep us going along here. All right, we'll have Abed, you should be unmuted, and I'll leave the screen up so folks can read your bio, and then I'll switch it so that way it'll just be you on the screen, but go ahead.
All right, thank you. My name's Abed Alshahal. I'm one of the owners of A&R Creative Group. We own and operate 11 restaurants here in Columbus, Ohio. So on the campus side, there's a place called Ethel and Tank, 4th Street. We have a farm-to-table restaurant in Clintonville called The Crest, healthy food restaurant, cafe called Alchemy, the Market in Italian Village, just to name a few. So my background, spent a lot of time working closely with farmers. That's how I was introduced into the restaurants. I graduated from Ohio State studying nutrition on my way to pre-med. And then I just took the restaurant route, and 11 years later, I'm running restaurants in the middle of COVID. So it was, maybe being a doctor would have been a better choice. But I think really to start maybe more linear with my background, I need to start with my family story. So we are Lebanese. We moved here in 1986. Lebanon, for those of you who don't know, it's in the Middle East, just under Israel, Palestine, Syria, touching the Mediterranean. So it's a very rich culture, a lot of like history there, but it's also has very complex politics. So in the 70s and 80s, there's a big civil war, and my parents fled the country, sought refuge here in the US, made their way to Pennsylvania. Eventually they made their way to Ohio, because my uncle was studying at Ohio State at the time. So that was the relationship there. I was not born at the time. I was born 3 years later. So I'm what you'd call first generation immigrant. So I grew up here in Columbus, Ohio, Worthington School District, and went on to go to Ohio State. My father, his background was really just find anything that you could do just to make ends meet and provide for family, because Maslow's hierarchy takes precedent, and it's shelter, food, maybe more so than passion and purpose. But he found his way to provide for our family. Went on to work at a grocery store and eventually gained a little equity in that grocery store. And that's what really gave us our opportunities that are in front of us to run 10 restaurants here in the city. So I think really the subject that I wanted to talk about connected to inclusivity today is inclusivity with a entrepreneurial lens, and how I, as an entrepreneur, business owner, business with all of the, gunk and just systems that you have to work through, and how to really use that to benefit the community as a whole and stay true to your morals, your ethics. Because there was a reason why I didn't want to go into business growing up around it and go into medicine. So I think for me, the three places where I feel like as a business owner, you can be inclusive, it really starts with your staff, your team, your workers, your community, specifically your local commerce, and what are you making your business dependent on and supporting? Are you buying from a big broadliner and getting one truck to drop off all your food? Or are you using local artists, designers, farmers, really the whole gamut? Like, how are you recycling those dollars that are earned from your consumer base into supporting other businesses and individuals? So starting with your staff, then your maybe your distribution channels, and then lastly, your community. So I was just going to go through those three, maybe give a few examples of how we've been able to engage, because none of us have a MBA, like we have one person in our entire company who has an MBA, but we're really just like street smart, just figured it out as we went, saw our dad as a immigrant just making it, and we learned from that and took it a little bit further. So sorry if you guys hear my son in the background. He's just gonna get his snack, and then I promise you he'll be quiet. So I think, yeah, starting with those 3 points, I'm going to start with utilizing your business in ways to build others up. You know, Jodi being a small farmer, when we first opened the Crest, that was really where I got my start in the restaurants. Was thinking about distribution channels, how to have the freshest food, how to have the healthiest food. And I just started reaching out to farmers. And then really secondarily, that's when it came to really understand the importance of just the sheer relationships. It really started with the product, having the best tasting food. And by the end of it, I felt like I was in local food politics, learning about communities where the issues are, the struggles of being a farmer, the struggles of distribution. So I think that's a natural place as a restaurateur to start, because you're feeding people, and that's the closest way to probably one of the most important relationships to build. We learned early on that there was a challenge to, you want to have a very diverse supply chain, and it was a really hard balance of being efficient and having 10, 12 farmers coming at 10, 12 different times, which I think still can be a challenge. I don't think distribution on the local setting has been solved per se. And I think that you just learn to just build the intimate relationships with maybe fewer farmers and build those relationships up. And so I think that's the natural place. Just kind of speaking to that, I think that is the challenge of being a business owner. It's very easy for my staff to just go on Amazon and order something very quickly, just as it is in your home. It becomes more challenging when you have a very diverse supply chain. And we don't have local commerce, doesn't have all the technology that big commerce has and all the support. So, just like Jodi had mentioned, as much as you're fighting to cultivate your own system and a local system, we're still dependent on a much broader, bigger system. So we still use big suppliers. We still use US Foods for whether it be cleaning supplies or big bulk grains. So for us, part of that relationship, because the people who work for these big corporate companies, they're also living in our cities too. They're employed by them. There's maybe customers who have stocks in those big companies. And as much as on the local food side, it kind of maybe demonize the big industrial system because it has its challenges, I think it's important to understand how you could maybe bridge that gap as well. So we've found some very interesting ways to maybe like build those relationships with big industrial companies such as US Foods, and think about ways, or Red Bull is another example, ways that we can get their dollars to maybe compete for their dollars to flood back into our communities. So most recently with the work around inclusiveness, we approached Red Bull with this idea for a marketing campaign of "We all have wings." So Red Bull had a competition for just a new marketing campaign around inclusivity. They were going to flood all that money back towards charities and organizations doing work around diversity and inclusion. And my brother's just a really creative marketing guru. I wouldn't tell him that. Hopefully he doesn't watch this video. But he pitched the idea of "We all have wings" to them. And, they're working with 2 local Columbus artists to, they bring this idea into fruition. I think that's a good example of maybe finding ways to not just compete against the industrial system, but also bring resources in to build people up. So, yeah, those are really the examples that I had in terms of ways that a business can work. I think it's just really, I think the key word is intentionality. are you being intentional with where you're spending your money? I think as a business owner, you spend a lot of time thinking about where you're going to gain more market share, increase your revenue, but also how are you spending those dollars? Not just cutting spending, but where are you intentionally placing your money? Are you building up that local designer, giving them the first chance? Are you identifying staff's passion on your team and maybe giving them an opportunity to work on a project that they haven't, you know? So I think that's a good natural transition of really inclusivity with the workplace, with our employees, and the intentionality of engaging with employees. So for us, that's probably our biggest strength. The only reason we have had the success that we have isn't necessarily because we're solid restaurant operators or we have a good, strong, sound business knowledge. It's really our ability to connect with people, and it really begins with staff. And I think naturally, you know, you could always look at as a business, you're creating jobs, you're creating opportunities for your staff, you're able to pay them more with your success, and you're creating jobs. But I think that our ability to maybe identify staff's strengths and build positions around their strengths, not so much identifying a need and finding that right person to fill a position. It's a little bit backwards. And that mentality has led us a lot of different paths. You know, we had a staff that was very passionate about local farming, and we had two people in particular who were strong urban farmers. They worked on our team, they served on the side, and we had an opportunity to take a big piece of land in Italian Village, and it was a 3-year project of, running and managing a 2-acre urban farm. Way harder than it sounds, and to the farmers, like, so much respect to you. You know, we had a team that we were of 6, which a lot of farmers, when they're doing small plot farming, that's not a privilege that they have. And it was a big challenge. But that's just an example. It was maybe a trial and error. It wasn't the right timing, place. We learned a lot. It was great for engaging. It wasn't a successful business by any means, but it was a example where we were invested in our individual staff and really giving them equity. And there's more examples around that, you know, and I mentioned in the beginning of this, my father's work ethic led him to have a small percentage of equity in his business to then go on and buy his own business. And I think that mentality is very crucial as a business owner, to really identify your staff's vision, their passion, where they're headed, and whether it be invest in them or give them the tools for them to succeed, and not necessarily look at every single person coming through your organization as a potential competitor. I think that's very, very crucial. You know, Alchemy is an example where we brought on a staff member who helped us found the concept, and she has equity within it. So, you know, we have a lot of examples like that, like a general manager who worked for us was in a custody battle, ended up in Wapakoneta, and we invested in him to open up his own restaurant because we trusted his work ethic. And I don't think as a business owner, you have opportunities to just invest in every employee who comes through your business, but really just having that inclusive, open dialogue of what is your vision, where are you headed, how can we help you, and really cultivating that. The last example of, I think, being inclusive is really just how are you integrating to your community as a whole. So as a business, it's not a matter of just you and your customers, but what are some ways that we can connect with our community, you know, whether it be raising money for nonprofits, or maybe more complex ways of partnering with the university to help facilitate a study or provide opportunities for students. I actually think about the first time that I met Mark. He had an idea. He was an anthropologist, and he wanted to do just a small, like, anthropology happy hour for his team. And, you know, we brought our whole team together. We had our beer buyer, our chef, myself, and Mark. And we just pulled inspiration from Mark, and we created this menu around 5 anthropologists, one who was a carnivore, or studied carnivores, and that'd be weird to be an anthropologist and a carnivore at the same time. But really, like, identifying like 5 anthropologists and creating dishes that we were inspired by from them, you know, or finding a beer that was an old Chinese clay pot that they brewed beer in, and they extracted the yeast and propagated this 1,000-year-old beer. That's like a very small example of partnering with just like a local group, but what that does with the experience that you're creating for others. And those are things that people will remember for lifetimes. You know, that's more on like the fun academic happy hour, but also, you know, installing a rooftop garden and engaging the Ohio State School of Architecture, and just really cultivating those relationships, going back to what Jodi's speaking about. So, you know, I don't think it's always, although it's important to, you know, put some of your money back, you know, put some of your money back into the community. I think it's also crucial to create experiences and make those experiences inclusive. So thank you.
All right, thanks so much, Abed. Yeah, I'm sorry to cut you off there.
Yeah.
I'll unmute Pastor John, and then we'll definitely have time for Q&A afterward. So let's see. All right. All right, go ahead, Pastor John.
Sure. So my name is John Edgar, and I serve as the executive director of a faith-based nonprofit on the south side of Columbus called Community Development for All People. And my colleague, Erin West, is also part of the group. And if we have time for questions at the end, she'll join in at that point. Now, our organization has gotten deeply involved in issues around food access, equity, and inclusion. And much of that's visible in a particular aspect of our work called the All People's Fresh Market. And that market is embedded in a broader part of our activities called Healthy Eating and Living, or HEAL. And Erin West actually heads that component of our work. And the fresh market has grown to scale where at this point we provide free fruits, vegetables, and perishable items, dairy products, and eggs to, so far this 1 year, more than 37,000 different individuals. And the market is designed not to be a traditional food pantry, but rather an opportunity to include a much broader range of people and the opportunity to eat healthier in order to live healthy. And the composition of the people that shop in our market very much looks like the demographics of the south side of Columbus. So about half of the people that shop in our market are African American, half are white, and then there's also a pretty rich sprinkling of folks who are first generation immigrants speaking a variety of first languages. And all the people in this market have incomes below 200% of the poverty level. Most of the food comes to us through the Mid-Ohio Food Collective. And Mark Anthony, if you have a chance, you could put up the first of those pictures if you're able to get to them. It's and that's simply a look at the exterior of our market. It's on Parsons Avenue, close to Whittier. And this building that we acquired about 3 to 4 years ago, actually before we bought it, was a drive-through beer and wine carryout. And you can still see the front garage door that we replaced with windows. And this market, it has become something that is very popular in the community because it actually, particularly prior to COVID-19, had the look and feel of a kind of funky, hip, urban farmer's market, if you go to the second of these slides. And that simply shows the inside of the market. And there is one wall that still has coolers where originally when you drove through, you could pick out beer and wine, and now they're crispers for fruits and vegetables. In warm weather, the garage doors go up and people come and go to shop. on this quest from our perspective of simply affirming the fundamental truth that each and every one of us is the leading actor in our own life story. And we have the capacity to be practitioners of health and wellness for ourselves, for the folks in our family, and in our community. And so the model shopper in the All People's Fresh Market comes every week and takes whatever they want that will enable them to feed themselves and their families and maybe some of their neighbors, but take only what they can use and then come back and shop again. And so we have found that this approach is very welcomed and appreciated in the community. When people come to shop with us for the very first time, they sign up, they become a member of the Fresh Market, and we issue them a little loyalty card like you get from Kroger's or Giant Eagle. And after that, every time people come and shop, they simply show and swipe that loyalty card. So it's not an experience of people being clients and sort of folks who have to depend upon the charity of someone else, but there's more of a sense that we're all in this together. And as a result, this market and a drive-through beer and wine store that has less than 2,000 square feet has actually grown to become the largest point of distribution of free food anywhere in the state of Ohio. And we're told it's one of the 20 most active points distributing free food across the entire country. And it's become so popular that with the help of the city of Columbus and Mid-Ohio Food Bank and others, we're in the process of getting ready to open a second location in Linden on Cleveland Avenue. And if you go to the next slide, if that's okay, I do want to pause and say that in the midst of COVID-19, things have changed. And so for this period, we've converted much of what we're doing to a drive-through. And so on any given day, we have these steady lines of cars that come down Parsons Avenue, pull in on the north side of our building, while another whole group of folks come up the alley and come the opposite direction on the south side of the building. And when people give us their information, show their loyalty card, then we put a box of produce and other items in the vehicle. People can still walk up, but it right now can't go inside the building, and we provide food to them there. When we get to November 11th, we're going to switch back to a hybrid model where people that feel more comfortable staying in their cars or just walking up to the front of the building can do that. But starting November 11th, people will be welcomed back inside again. We're making some adjustments to ensure greater social distancing. We take the temperature of everybody who comes now as a volunteer and everybody who comes to shop going forward. And we'll do a variety of other things to keep people safe. But we want to restore some of that sense of community that's better experienced when we can be face-to-face, even if we're all wearing masks. And then if you go to the next slide, this is one that simply shows a rendering of the facility that we are renovating right now in Linden. This is the site of the former Eagle Market. It was a convenience store with about 7,000 square feet. And by next spring, that building will be completely repurposed. We've got a grant of about $1.5 million from the city of Columbus. And when we're finished, about 3,000 square feet of this building will be the Linden Fresh Market. So it'll be 50% bigger than our current location. And then another part of this building will have a satellite office of the charitable pharmacy of Central Ohio that is currently located just on the south side, and it fills prescriptions free of charge for people who have a valid script but don't have the money or the insurance to get that script filled. And then there'll also be some community meeting space. And so by the time we're done, this will be a combination of a traditional pharmacy, but also a location of where we're promoting food as medicine, or a pharmacy that's spelled Pharmacy. And again, for us, all of this is about including more people under this concept that every one of us is truly the leading actor in our own life story. every one of us can be a practitioner of health. If we eat healthier, we can live healthier. And then just want to take a little bit to talk a bit more about what this looks like in terms of equity and inclusion. Now, at the most simple level, when we're providing food free of charge to low-income people, it means that they can then use the limited cash they have for other essentials, such as housing, utilities, transportation. Also, our fresh market is important because we exist in a type of food desert. And I'm using that word slightly differently than it is frequently used. Often food deserts are talked about exclusively in terms of geographic distance. And so a low-income neighborhood that doesn't have a quality supermarket that has fruits and vegetables that's walkable, then we talk about that as a food desert, and that's valid. But on the part of the South Side where we are, the issue is not geographic distance. It's about access and being deprived from being able to shop in the Giant Eagle or the Kroger store, simply because folks don't have money to do that. And so we are able to include just this much greater number of people in having access to healthy foods by removing the barrier of the cost that it involves. And then as I draw to a close, I would say that for us, inclusion also means making certain that not only our shoppers fully and authentically reflect the diversity of the people that live on the South Side, but we want the same to be true for those who are on staff. And so about half of our staff members that work in our market are folks who are African-American, about half are white. And we strive to have the same thing with volunteers, because this whole initiative is primarily run through volunteers. Many of our shoppers themselves give forward in that way. And then everybody that comes to shop is encouraged to then take next steps forward around their own health and wellness. We talk a lot about social determinants of health, with food equity being definitely foundational to that. But we're also encouraging people to take place in a wide range of small groups that Erin West coordinates. And so, especially before COVID-19, we'd have 15 to 20 different groups meeting every week. We do cooking classes, sessions on nutrition, people that want to manage chronic illnesses such as hypertension, diabetes. And we also encourage people to be physically active. So we have a running club and a walking group. We operate a community bike shop. We do yoga, Tai Chi, and things like Urban Zen, all intended to build an inclusive community grounded in this conviction that if we eat healthier, we'll live healthier. So appreciate the chance to share. And again, in whatever Q&A time, Erin West will have other things potentially to share.
Great, thanks so much to all three, to Pastor John, to Jodi, and Abed for your presentations thus far. So I guess we're gonna move into our Q&A session, and we're a small group this evening. But put here the bios for both Erin and Gary, and I don't see Gary on our.
Yeah, it looks like Gary did join. I didn't see him to begin with, but he is here. And
Okay.
Gary Stevens is the manager of our Fresh People's Market. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, welcome, Gary. I'm going to unmute our panelists here, but as we're getting set up, I guess I'd like Erin and Gary to just introduce themselves if there's anything you'd like to share before we open the floor to questions. And while Erin and Gary are talking, if folks have questions that they don't want to necessarily be voiced out loud, if you want to just type that in the chat section, I can read those out to our speakers. Otherwise, Erin and Gary, if you want to just, again, introduce yourselves and share any lingering thoughts right now.
Well, hi, my name is Erin, and I am the Healthy Eating and Living Director at Community Development for All People. And I just wanted to share a little bit about our values, because I think one of the most important things is that we try to be inclusive just generally the way that we're made. One thing is everything that we name has all people in it. So that is definitely a value. We also have a value called radical hospitality, and this is about actively extending a welcome. And that is true for all people. And we really try to live and breathe that. We also have a value called catalytic collaboration. And this is really intended to remind ourselves that we are not the end all be all, that we do things through partnership and connection with others. And we seek to do that with many talented people, kind of what Abed was discussing is like, oh, who's around? What are our assets? How can we really tap into the people in our community and the community partners that we have? And then the last thing that I would say about our values is that we're really trying to create something called the third place. And so the first place is your home. The second place is where you go to work or school. And the third place is where you hang out. And these places are really designed to have everyone be welcome. So an example is a library. Everybody's welcome, whether you're poor, you're rich, black, white, gay or straight, whatever you may be, you are welcome. And so CD4AP really tries to embody these values and create these types of spaces so that natural connection happens, and therefore lots of magic happens. I think that's my opinion. So I just wanted to share that in terms of inclusion, those are three kind of values that we remind ourselves about every staff meeting because it is that important to us. Thanks.
And I'm Gary Stevens, I'm the market manager, and Erin has said everything wonderfully. She stole all my thunder. So only thing I can add is we're all people and we serve all people. So we, inclusion, all of our volunteers, everybody's welcome to come and join. And hopefully everybody come with a smile on their face.
Excellent. Thank you to Erin and Gary for adding those comments to the discussion. So I've stopped sharing the screen here. And so if there's anyone who has a question, I'm gonna now give everyone the ability to unmute themselves. If you have a question, please unmute yourself and go for it. I think just to start us off, I wanna just say, as I'm listening to everyone speaking tonight, I think, and in the context of the work that I do on food, place, and identity, I think all through the panelists and then what Erin and Gary are sharing here, the way that we use food to create our senses of place and our senses of belonging definitely speak volumes to the identities that we are including in that community. And I'm very much appreciative of this kind of message that runs through it all. As folks are thinking of questions, I think one of the things I like to ask each of our speakers, something that struck me is, this notion of lessons learned, whether it's how do we start up a farm, how do we immigrate into this country and establish our family identity and sense of belonging here in the area? How do we start a market from scratch, and what do we learn moving into a second one? So just in turn, as you feel inspired, I'm curious from our speakers, what are some of those key lessons that you think are really propelling you to do the work that you're continuing to do?
Well, my biggest lesson learned, I've been doing this for 13 years, is don't try to do too much. Just focus on like that quality over quantity, and like really when you're building a relationship, really putting that energy into that relationship and not trying to, build 10, 15 relationships all at once. Or if you're taking on a project or creating an organization to make a positive impact in your community, really putting yourself into that. And I don't know, that's been a big lesson learned. And especially when COVID hit, sometimes life just presents things that you don't necessarily expect. If purpose and passion is your life's work, you still have to have time for yourself and for your family, because life's always going to find a way to surprise you and grab your attention. So really just being intentional with your time.
Erin, maybe you could share a little bit about your experience of growing the market and now envisioning a second one in Linden. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy to. One thing that I have learned is it's been very helpful to have a vision or a goal, which may sound simple, but it's sort of like, and I make fun with Pastor John because he envisioned an outdoor market and I envisioned an Aldi, when I was designing it, but it's sort of like I'm imagining that people will be shopping. We are going to be about food, but we're also about health. So how do we inspire people to cook and connect to their own health and wellness by what they put in their body? So it's sort of like, what is the overall goal and how do we all as a team, work towards that goal? And then that really got a lot of people excited. And many people are coming, and we do videos about how to make your own vegetable broth from kitchen scraps. And I have people coming at the market and saying, hey, I tried that. I did that at home, that kind of thing. I see Jodi nodding her head. I can imagine this happens in your garden too, where people are trying different things. They're experiencing it and they want to share with you and that kind of thing. And then like partners see what you're doing and they're saying there's something magic about this place. Can we replicate it? What can we do? Where are the other areas where this would be really beneficial? And then I thought it was a brilliant idea to combine the charitable pharmacy because their goals are really to help people manage their medications, but also live healthy lives and maybe even eliminate medications over time if people get to a healthier space, things like that. So for me, it's about the goals, the vision, and carrying that forth, and then inspiring people to see it, even before it's happening. If you could have seen this ugly, dirty space that I say I inherited, you know what I mean? I had 8 weeks to get it ready, and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing, and I'm not saying it's about me. I'm saying that everybody came together, and they caught wind of this idea, and they made it happen. So I'm blessed that we got to experience that.
I am struggling because like I'm an academic and a nerd, and I have like a million things that I could say about a million threads that came up in the last 45 minutes, and I think it's almost a shame that, well, number one, that we don't have more people here to hear all our brilliant ideas, but they'll watch it on YouTube later. But also just that we don't have more time to talk because there's so many interesting like synergies here. So I just want to say, like, I mean, the first thing is, Pastor John, your presentation like threw me right into that, like, oh God, I'm not doing enough. And I'm right back into this like feeling like this shame about like who I am and where I am and what I do. But I try to balance that with like, I think I'm in that space of having the awareness and focusing, like Abed was saying about like, focus on who you got to sort of focus on something and stick with the stay to your path and like be true to who you are and but keeping that balanced with like being aware of the bigger picture. I've been working with the Food Rescue US people on Friday mornings to bring food from these semi trucks down on Groveport Road to food pantries all over the city. And it's like, again, like when I first did that and I went to a semi truck full of produce that was getting like rescued from farmers, and I was just like, oh my God, like my 30 cabbages doesn't mean anything, but it means something just really, really different. And I think that's, I have to keep reminding myself of that. But it was really also great to see the project you guys are doing. And so I don't know what the lesson learned is there, other than like, you have to like open up and close and open up, you have to like stay focused on what you're doing, but also like be open to the world of possibilities that are out there without getting like lost in the ocean of incredible ideas. So
Well, Jodi, just so you're not alone, I do have pages of notes also as well, just to keep everyone on track here. I did see that Rod had unmuted. So Rod, if you've got a question for our panelists, go
Yeah,
for it.
thank you so much, Pastor John, Erin, and your colleagues. And thank you, Abed, also. I think one of the questions I have, though, was inspired by a book that I read years ago. Unfortunately, I've lost the name. I gave away my copy, and I want to find another copy. Maybe one of you knows. But the issue is really something you touched on, Erin. Getting access to real food and not just prepared junk food, right, is one thing. But the book that I'm referring to talked about how a lot of people who don't know what to do with real food, right? How do you prepare it, right? And so they go out and, if they have access and some money, they'll go out and buy boneless, skinless chicken breasts because it's easy to cook. Now, of course, I'll tell you, as a Chinese American, that's one thing that most Chinese are totally eschew, because of course we know that all the flavor in food, and meats especially, meats comes from bones and fat, right? And so I can't think of anything more tasteless, right, to start with than a boneless, skinless chicken breast. And yet, people are paying $3.50 a pound for this stuff in the supermarket, right? Same thing, the baby back ribs. People are buying back ribs because they read a recipe and they'll try it because they've had it in a restaurant, and they're paying $3.50 a pound for bones. You buy pork, the pork tenderloin left over at 99 cents a pound. So my question for that long lead in is, what are people doing or finding that will help people be able to realize that they can do things more economically and more nutritionally with all the great foods that you're providing here, right? When they have absolutely no experience in doing that and no realization, being sold by the fast food industry, the prepared foods, mega conglomerates, right? To say, this is the way you eat. And, you buy everything shrink wrapped in cellophane, right? But, how do we educate? How do we get people to actually try to help themselves, as you say, Pastor John, help themselves be more healthy in what they do, not just in what they buy, but what they can do with what they buy or procure through your free store.
Sure. Erin, I know you got at least some answers to that.
Well, there's no one answer, right? But there are many different things that we are trying. Many of the foods are some of the foods that we receive in the market, we have no idea what they are. Because they come from another country, that kind of thing. So we're Googling, we're finding out how to cook them, and then we're actually providing taste tests. Now, during COVID, there's been some real barriers to this kind of thing. We have chefs that work with us that create recipes with the items that are in the market. And what we do is we create cook kits for folks, and we're doing watch parties. So people will watch the video together with their masks on and things like this. And then either myself or one of my staff folks actually share any advice based on what they learned on the video. And then they get to take home that cook kit and do it in their own. And one of the things recently was egg rolls that we made, which was kind of a fun one. And then we have partners in the community that provide different nutrition information so that people can understand about eating from the rainbow and why it's valuable to really make that kind of selection, that kind of thing. And then because we also give out meat at the market, we don't necessarily think about the cost of it, but it is something that it is a benefit that they can actually cook meat that they receive there. Recently, we had a talk by a woman who's a professor at OSU. Her name is Carol Smathers, and she did an experiment about how to eat healthfully on $1.50 a day with the meals. And that was kind of interesting. But we're just really trying to pull in resources to inspire folks and offer opportunities for them to start thinking about it. Because a lot of times we're on autopilot in life. We're just hungry. So then we go to the quickest, easiest thing we can. When Pastor John was talking about food selection and how we see it as a food desert, if you think about it, if you had a choice between getting pasta and sauce, which would cost you $2 from the store, and or a cantaloupe, you would almost always choose the pasta and sauce because it is more filling. You can feed your whole family, that kind of thing. So I just love the fact that we're providing the fresh foods, or many of them, and that they are not feeling like they're put in that position to have to choose every time. I know that doesn't answer your whole question, but we are trying different things to
And then
inspire.
I would add two other things real quick. That, COVID-19 is frustrating, but it wasn't here all along, and at some point we'll get beyond it. And so, for us, having a demonstration kitchen where people come together and cook with one another is really key, and has been another part of it. The other thing, though, that I would say is, and it's part of the reason we're so eager to get people back together where they can interact, is it's people telling their own stories about what they've done with the food that inspires somebody else to try as well. So I am one of the number of middle-class people, on this Zoom encounter, and our values aren't always the only best values. And what I'm trying to say is, so when other hard-living folks are telling stories about how they took some food and what they did with it, and how they were able to do something that reminded them of grandma's recipe but did it a little bit different, all of a sudden it makes more sense. And some of that's even in terms of managing chronic health things like hypertension and diabetes. But anyway, Jodi, yeah, I didn't mean to drone.
I was just going to say, I think that's I don't know how to phrase it, but I think that those are issues that we have to think about no matter what demographic we're talking about. So I know that when I can remember when the Crest opened, that storytelling was a big deal for you guys, and telling the story of where the food comes from and how a dish was created, and that is about, again, the same, it's all connected, right? Because lots of people in lots of socioeconomic and cultural places don't know how to cook anymore. So I mean, Michael Pollan did that series for Netflix a few years ago about fire, air, earth, water, or something. And he talked in the episode, I don't remember which episode it was, but he was talking about in India how Nestle and other international food industrial, system companies have gone in and basically provided the means for people to lose the generational knowledge of how to cook, and that everyone's getting sicker. And so it's not even just the people who can't afford to eat better. I look at my brother and his wife, and they earn 10 times as much as my husband and I do, and the choices they make around food I don't understand, because I'm you could afford to make such better choices. And so I think that's just kind of important to understand and think about. And then also, just from my own perspective, if I'm in the kitchen and I'm doing something that I think, the making stock out of the scraps in your kitchen, I think is an amazing idea, and something that's it's so in keeping with it's the same values of, let's use the few resources that we have. In reality, we all have very few resources. And I think that that's important. So when I'm in the kitchen and I'm doing something and I'm oh my God, this is one of these smart ideas that probably many people I know or are following my farm wouldn't think of. Let me tell them, oh, you don't have to can tomatoes. You can just cut them up and put them in a bag in your freezer, and that's fine, if you have room for it. So that's it. Shamati.
Good.
All right, I just want to keep in mind it is 7:14. So if you're able to stay, please do. I just want to make sure at least we get in the recording Andrew's question here, which to me reads as a very anthropological question. So I'm glad he asked it. He's mainly curious about how we can come to enter into new foodscapes. And my sense of this question is, especially for students or for folks who are very much used to the way that they're eating, how do we enter a new kind of environment with food? How do we create that relationship? And on that kind of note, then, who has the means to grow their own food or to get to a good grocery store? What are these gender and class issues that are coming up that, again, that we're challenged to think about when we think of equity, inclusion, and justice? So for this last question, I think a very timely question, a heady one as well. But if anyone has thoughts on, again, how do we move this this conversation to open up the possibilities of a different kind of foodscape experience that is equitable and inclusive?
I'll start by saying I think the place you have to, one of the places that's easiest to start is when people are very young. Start with kids. I mean, that's the way I was brought up. I was raised by immigrant parents from China, right? And my father especially, he loved to cook because he loved to eat. And he always said, he insisted that that I try everything. And he wouldn't take, no, I don't like it. I said, well, how do you know? You haven't even tried it. Right? He said, I will take it if you try it and say you don't like it, that's fine. You don't have to have it anymore. But I insist that you try it before you form this prejudice. And I think that sort of attitude, I mean, it's hard to do. It's hard to not give in to your kids. As you say, we're all too busy. It's much easier to just give in all the time. But I think and that lesson has lived with me for my whole life. Another one that I love joking about, again, he came from a farming village in China as a preteen. He said, don't waste food. Wasting food is a sin. And so I try the thing that every kid and an adolescent tries. Well, fine. I mean, no, I don't want it. I said, give it to them then. He said, well, don't you realize there are all these poor, starving children in America that would love to have that food?
Jodi, I think you're muted right now.
Sorry. So just in terms of this idea of who has the means to grow their own food or get to the grocery store, the who has the means to grow their own food, I think, comes up a lot in the urban farming conversations, especially around grants that have been coming through USDA over the last 3 to 5 years. And then also, I know Julia Lynn had talked about her project and the Ohio State, I forget what they called it, but there was some money that came through there to try to get people growing. And there was this promise made to people who, like, well, you guys can grow, and then the university is going to buy the produce that you grow in your backyard. And like, as somebody who's been growing food, trying to grow food in my backyard for 8 years, like the amount of food that one could grow on the amount of land they were helping to try to prepare these people to grow on was just like sounded like an absurd idea to me. So I think that when we talk to people about the idea of growing their own food, like not just for themselves, but to really like as a means of supporting oneself, that there needs to be like a reduction of that romanticization of urban farmer, that like almost nobody's making any money. I mean, I'm not making any money. I make friends. I eat really well. I get the medicine of both like the social like vitamins as well as the food that I eat, that I make grow, but nobody's really making a lot of money at this. And so I think it's really important. I think that a lot of doors have been like opened, especially to try to be inclusive, but I don't know that the big picture has always been looked at. So I think that when you welcome people into the foodscapes, to go back to the question, like you just need to think about what you're claiming you're welcoming people into, and be realistic.
Great. Well, on that note, I'm going to just end us there again with this notion of welcoming and being welcoming to the folks and entering into that kind of new foodscape kind of environment. So again, I just want to thank everyone for participating, to Jodi, Pastor John, Abed, Gary, Erin, and for those who have stuck with us on our participant list. Let me just put on the screen the PowerPoint again. And just to say that we can see that November 17th is their justice talk again. It'll be the third and final part of this particular series for the autumn. So again, thank you all for attending. We'll have the recording up hopefully within the next week or so. Thank you again and have a wonderful evening to you all.